In the world of American politics, campaign promises are the cornerstone of election strategies. They reflect the aspirations of political leaders and the desires of voters. Yet, many of these promises remain unfulfilled, either due to political opposition, shifting priorities, or legislative obstacles. Over the past few years, both Republicans and Democrats have made bold claims during their campaigns, but the reality of governance has proven far more complicated. Democratic Party promises. Joe Biden 2020 campaign. Joe Biden's 2020 campaign was filled with ambitious goals. Particularly on issues like student debt, climate change, and economic equity. However, the administration faced significant hurdles in delivering on these promises. Student loan forgiveness was a major talking point for Biden, who vowed to cancel at least $10,000 in student debt for all borrowers. While he has canceled billions for certain groups, his larger plan was blocked by the Supreme Court. A promise partially fulfilled, but far from the sweeping relief many expected. Biden also championed climate action, aiming to invest heavily in clean energy. The 2022 Inflation Reduction Act did provide billions for green initiatives, yet it fell short of its initial goals. The ambitious Build Back Better plan, which included even greater climate investments, was scaled back dramatically. Another partial fulfillment. On the social front, universal pre-K and paid family leave were signature promises. These provisions were entirely removed from legislative negotiations, leaving a gap in Biden's efforts to improve access to early education and family support. This promise remains unfulfilled. Perhaps one of the most publicized promises was the push for a $15 minimum wage. This effort failed to gain traction in Congress, with opposition even within the Democratic Party. Ultimately, this promise was not kept. Republican Party promises. Donald Trump 2016 campaign and GOP 2020. Donald Trump's 2016 campaign was marked by grandiose promises that appealed to his base, but many of these initiatives proved difficult to execute.
I would build a great wall, and nobody builds walls better than me, believe me. And I'll build them very inexpensively.
The most iconic of his promises was to build a wall on the southern border and have Mexico pay for it.
Who's gonna pay for the wall?
While hundreds of miles of the border wall were constructed, Mexico never covered the cost, and many sections of the wall faced legal and funding issues. A partial fulfillment, but far from what was originally promised. Trump repeatedly vowed to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare. Despite several attempts in Congress, these efforts failed, leaving the ACA largely intact. The only notable change was the elimination of the individual mandate. This promise was not fulfilled. Infrastructure overhaul was another significant commitment.
We need to pass a $1 trillion infrastructure plan to build new roads and bridges and airports and tunnels and highways and railways all across our great nation.
Trump proposed a $1 trillion investment in rebuilding America's infrastructure, but his administration failed to pass comprehensive infrastructure legislation, a promise that went largely unfulfilled.
I will never, ever let you down.
Lastly, Trump pledged to lower the national debt, but the reality was the opposite. The national debt rose substantially under his administration, fueled by tax cuts and increased spending. A broken promise in fiscal policy. the statistics behind the broken promises. When it comes to quantifying these unfulfilled promises, the numbers tell a stark story. According to PolitiFact's Trump-O-Meter, which tracks the fulfillment of Donald Trump's 2016 campaign promises, only about 25% of his promises were fully kept. A further 47% were broken or only partially fulfilled, leaving nearly half of his major pledges unmet by the end of his presidency. For Joe Biden, high-profile issues like universal pre-K and the $15 minimum wage remain unfulfilled. Many of the promises that shape the political landscape during election season remain unfulfilled, leaving voters disillusioned and skeptical of future pledges. The statistics reflect a fundamental truth about politics. Promises are easy to make, but far harder to keep. In light of these considerations, it is important to acknowledge that American politicians consistently uphold their promises in one instance. Do you remember the first seconds? These seconds depict the activities of the Israeli occupation, facilitated by equipment supplied through political channels from the U.S. Much of this equipment is funded by the taxes collected from the public. In many cases, it is expected that politicians guide the direction of our country and its policies. However, it is apparent that Israeli lobbies hold significant influence over our politicians, shaping the political landscape to align with their own interests and those of their associates. The United Nations Satellite Center reported that 2/3 of structures in Gaza have been damaged due to the ongoing Israeli genocide.
Shops, markets, offices, playgrounds.
Analysis from September 3rd and 6, 2024, revealed 66% of buildings affected. Additionally, around 68% of permanent crop fields have shown significant declines in health and density, contributing to broader economic and humanitarian concerns. This ethnic cleansing is only a small part of the crimes committed by the Israelis with the help of American politicians.